Relationship Battleship. Written especially for mothers who have beautiful daughters whom some men seek to slaughter, praying that my oldest will always remember what I've taught her more than what I've bought her, and that this mouthful to her is nothing but fruitful. For when they are teens and still a little green and haven't yet seen, besides on TV screens, that some men are just mean and can often demean. Often they're walking in herds, chirping like birds, acting absurd. And though well dressed and showing their best, early on it's nothing less. But as mothers, we would be remiss and often later pissed at the wolves not wanting to be seen, that only prey on young women to whom emotionally feed, and our young daughters would later then to grieve, as none of us are truly exempt from the attempt of these. Mothers don't want their daughters believing that they're the true reason for any man's treason, but only believing that as they grow into their own, that their vulnerable hearts from birth's start should be instead pierced with their truth, finding their Boaz, for they are just now really undeveloped roofs. Us reminding them always of who and whose they are from the start, words of affirmation, hoping to pierce their unexperienced heart like the tip of a dart. And when out of our reach, praying that they stay smart. As a mother and watching my own grow, there was so much I wanted my oldest to know. And there was so much more to life than filters, tweets, and showing off dough. Yet for this task, self had to ask to go back to some hurtful places and spaces in my own life before I was wife. Forcing self to remember being emotionally dismembered, healed now but still seeing the scars that linger. Crossing paths with that of hidden figures whom provided slick words in parallel with expensive dinners, whose fingers would let me pick out pretty dresses, and though impressive, the cost that was paid was that of excessive obsessions and not so hidden aggressions. And though appreciative, I soon realized it wasn't worth the stress. For the purchase of fine things, I was settling for something less. As they were often just toys purchased by boys that acted like kings, whom wanted me to only sing praises of what their spoils would bring. And ironically, and yet not romantically, when they get mad or frustrated or upset, they'd come recoup it all with little to no regret. And with this all, I was forced to recall me as a teen being baited into dating because my body's hormones couldn't keep waiting, always anticipating for someone to pick me. So often, anyone who thought I was pretty and a little witty, with one glance, I'd often give a chance, unknowingly, unaware that they only wanted what was in my pants. Then growing up as a young lady, I met many men who were first kind and then turned shady, often to want to make a baby, and I soon found myself trading their vanity for my sanity, as I believed their promises that led to only hopelessness, sleeplessness, recklessness, and then brokenness. And I soon became nothing but tired, and though wanting to retire, I kept working so hard in relationships that soon had me fired by men. Never understanding their upgrades and or trades, often left with just questions and decisions that I had made, of why the silent treatments and mistreatments, especially after all that I had done for them, yet them easily spitting me out like I was just phlegm. And then there was the time when first horrifically, but yet now prolifically, it became clear that the words often of the men I seriously dated, specifically stating the exact same words when we met. Always how they could, but of course never would let me go, of how they just had to get to know me at any degree, at first not caring about sharing or if I wanted to marry. For they would do anything, needing, pleading for just the room and opportunity to prove to me that they were different. Saying things like they couldn't believe I was single and how lucky it was for us to now meet and mingle, promising me that I was no cheap thrill and we could just chill. About how they'd always keep it real, of where in my past, but now they're just there to heal. And my sea of untrust, they would soon calm to still. I remembered on the times, thinking I had always found the one, and that I had finally won. As I was excited while citing, yes, it's you I want to know, and him with a grin reciprocating, yes, we can take it slow. At first, always just chilling and catching no feelings. There was lots of smoking while joking that often led to choking, and with constant drinking and no thinking, while both poking fun at life and all the things that we had done. But after a while, of course, of waiting and relating, equating and verbating, verbal commitments were then made and we were soon dating. Them always of how this was going so good, for they liked that I was suburb with a little bit of hood, yet just misunderstood. Then, Talks of maybe creating a baby, then talks of name changes for our lives he was rearranging, as their life was no longer the same, for I had finally tamed. And of course, the beginning was always fine, because we were aligned, not knowing that we had signed a relationship on a battleship's dotted line. For we had opened attraction's gate, entering the game in which started with the trading of names, then of seeing what's different and or the same, but now having no shame, of power struggles, of whose destiny one could tell their friends that they had claimed. Competitive, so both ready to win, declaring that we were now both kin, and though on opposite sides, we both had our own manuals to guide, to help us find our heart ships with only internal tips, filled with only our past experiences and serious unknown differences. And though neither could see over each other's boards that we were not meant to be, we both held our black and yellow pegs, and so it begins. His move. He calls continued friendship multiple times, all while claiming he's fine but just needing some time to think with a wink, promising that he's definitely not trying to sink my ships, while begging me not to trip. My move. I beg for continued transparency and honesty multiple times, as I'm tired of crying and trying to find why he was once elated when we start dating, but now seems to only be hating the fact that I'm on constant attack of him. For now I'm constantly translating for verbatim of what he promised when we first started dating. And though we're still playing, I feel he is now ignoring all of what I'm saying. I soon begin to remind him of his promises to me when I was still free, and how his uncertainty to me are signs that this game in me may not really be where he wants to be. I call his move. But now passive-aggressive is now his position of disposition. Though black and white like composition, he refuses to see that his initial attractions have now become distractions. As this game of action that we're playing and what he was initially saying comes with no redactions. Hurtful words are now often exchanged, his stress uncontrolled, popping off like loose rubber bands. Yet still wants to hold hands, thinking there's still a chance that I will forget and forgive and let him advance. He calls my move. Me, I'm going to bed now in silence, body filled with defiance. My pillow is now an island, surrounded by only trying and crying. And though we're still kissing, and when he's gone I still miss him, internally I'm wishing for a new position and decision and condition. At night praying to God because I feel like I'm a Christian. For I am now seeing this being is just a boy internally who's dressed like a man with designer brands, and me now dressed internally with unspoken buts and ands. For he's now playing chess, not new to this game because he's playing like a vet. I instead digress, no longer his woman but instead just a guest, who no longer wants to get dressed or address his mess. But yet I continue to undress and let him play his assigned position as he continues to ignore my heart's transmission's condition. And though now I'm steaming and no longer dreaming, he's lying all the time, results in constant overheating and thinking that he's now cheating and now beating me at this game. We're both placing blame. But instead of pulling over, we both instead roll over and just continue to play, continuous now every day. Both saying in unison, your move, because we're now mid-game. No longer love, but only cold shoulders. We're now playing the game rough, both talking tough, because really our ships shouldn't be touching and there shouldn't be too much fussing or cussing, but we're both no longer playing fair and no longer a pair. As when we get alone, I look in the mirror and stare in despair at all the gray hair, because inside I know he's holding legions of demons that are always screaming at him with words of no meaning, causing my tears constant streaming. Because inside, without a doubt, I'm like the movie Get Out, but silent and can't shout. I continue to suffer within, taking my losses onto the chin. Now reviewing life's route, I abruptly stand up and call a timeout. Now, praying for God to step in, asking him for frustration where he's been. God laughs, stating, my daughter, I was waiting for you to retire so I can step in, so you can really win. I grin. Take his hand and say, finally, let's begin. God steps forward, advising that we must first be on one accord, now both stepping towards the game board, advising me that though I was biblical, he indeed is pinnacle, and with him anything fixable, for he is a God whom still performs miracles. Providing me with the revelation to elevation is for me first to be aware that in this game, my opponent would often seek patterns, which if not monitored would destroy, leaving me tattered. And that though me and my opponent had initially both agreed to heed the rules, that my opponent had always been cheating and then ultimately beating me. Because from the beginning, my opponent was already scoring, listening closely to my story. My grid, he was circling, studying, plotting on the specific weaknesses I'd have of wanting to be loved so bad. That my opponent had become a distraction, causing a chain reaction, which had gained nothing but traction in my emotions. He advised of the times when my opponent was holding my hips while kissing my lips. It was a distraction, as he was sinking my heart ships, while providing me tips on what I needed to change, about my garment strategy of myself, while his remained unchanged. God revealed that though, yes, we were both playing, none of us were really saying what really needed to be said, which was that there were players in the game that were both spiritually dead. God revealed that I had to take responsibility for the opponents I was choosing that constantly had me losing. I thank God for the strength needed to announce to my opponent that I was now finally out, exiting the game, for I had now quit, and no need to explain of how many ships that he had tipped. For my opponent could have this win and all of its sin, for now I was trusting God and had faith to now see whom he had prepared and who was waiting for me. As a mother with daughters, and one now a teen, whose eyes remain fixated on only that of a screen, I pray continuously that you don't choose opponents, but instead one that you can grow with God and then together as one team. I love you, Kayla.